Captain Bernard Warburton Lee stood on bridge of HMS Hardy at dawn on April 10, 1940, scanning narrow entrance to Fjord, leading toward Norwegian port of Narvik, where British intelligence reported German invasion force had arrived previous day during initial phase of German Operation Weserübung, coordinated assault on Denmark and Norway designed to secure Scandinavian resources and strategic positions before British and French forces could intervene. Warburton Lee commanded 2nd Destroyer Flotilla, consisting of 5 H-class destroyers: Hardy, Hotspur, Havoc, Hunter, and Hostile. Ships dispatched from Scapa Flow with orders to intercept German forces reported occupying Narvik, critical port through which Swedish iron ore passed to Germany via ice-free Norwegian waters during winter months when Baltic routes froze solid. German seizure of Narvik threatened to secure year-round iron ore supply essential to German steel production, while simultaneously denying British any opportunity to interdict this strategic resource flow that sustained German war economy. The tactical situation facing Warburton Lee presented extraordinary challenges unprecedented in modern naval warfare: requirement to conduct ship-to-ship combat in confined waters of Norwegian fjord system, where mountainous terrain rose directly from water, creating channels as narrow as 50 meters in places, restricting maneuverability while preventing long-range gunnery engagements that characterize typical destroyer actions in open ocean. Fjord stretched approximately 70 kilometers from open Norwegian Sea to Narvik at Fjord's eastern terminus, waterway varying from several kilometers wide at entrance to few hundred meters in narrower sections. Geography creating tactical environment where destroyer actions would occur at ranges measured in hundreds rather than thousands of meters. British destroyers designed for high-speed operations in open ocean would need to navigate through restricted waters while engaging enemy forces that could potentially ambush attacking flotilla from concealed positions along Fjord's irregular coastline. German forces occupying Narvik consisted of 10 destroyers from 1st and 3rd Destroyer flotillas under command of Commodore Friedrich Bonte, veteran naval officer commanding modern Z-class destroyers that represented Kriegsmarine's latest destroyer designs, incorporating heavy armament of 5 12.7-centimeter guns per ship, along with 8 torpedo tubes, vessels superior in individual firepower to British H-class destroyers, mounting 4 12-centimeter guns. German destroyers had transported mountain troops of 3rd Mountain Division to Narvik during initial invasion, successful landing operation placing approximately 2,000 German soldiers ashore to secure port facilities and surrounding areas against minimal Norwegian resistance. However, German destroyers faced critical vulnerability following successful landing operations, fuel situation becoming desperate as destroyers had consumed most fuel during voyage from German ports to northern Norway, leaving vessels with insufficient reserves for return journey or sustained combat operations. Warburton Lee received intelligence report during approach indicating German force at Narvik numbered 6 destroyers, significant underestimate of actual 10 destroyer force present, intelligence failure that would have critical consequences during subsequent engagement as British flotilla found itself outnumbered 2-1 rather than facing expected numerical parity. Despite uncertain intelligence and challenging tactical environment, Warburton Lee decided to proceed with attack, calculating that surprise assault at dawn could achieve decisive results before German forces organized effective defense, decision reflecting aggressive naval tradition, emphasizing offensive action even when facing uncertain odds. British destroyers entered Fjord at high speed shortly before dawn on April 10th, ships proceeding in line-ahead formation through narrowing waterway as darkness began lifting. Crews at action stations preparing for engagement that could commence at any moment once German positions were located. The First Battle of Narvik commenced at approximately 0430 hours when HMS Hardy, leading British formation, encountered German destroyer Wilhelm Heidkamp, anchored near Narvik harbor, serving as Commodore Bonte's flagship. Surprise complete as British destroyers closed to range under 500 meters before opening fire with main armament. Hardy's initial salvos struck Wilhelm Heidkamp multiple times, shells penetrating destroyers' thin armor, causing catastrophic damage, including hit on bridge that terminated Commodore Bonte, along with most ship's senior officers, sudden decapitation of German command structure, eliminating coordinated response during critical opening minutes of battle. British destroyers following Hardy engaged additional German vessels discovered anchored in harbor, concentrated gunfire at point-blank range, devastating stationary targets unable to maneuver effectively in confined anchorage, while surprise crews attempted to reach action stations and bring weapons to bear against attacking British force. HMS Hotspur and Havoc engaged German destroyer Anton Schmidt, anchored nearby. Combined fire from 2 British destroyers, overwhelming single German vessel within minutes. Heavy damage forcing German crew to abandon ship as fires spread through destroyer's hull. Hunter and Hostile attacked merchant shipping in harbor, including German supply vessels supporting invasion force, gunfire sinking or damaging multiple ships that represented critical logistics support for German mountain troops occupying Narvik. British destroyers achieved complete tactical surprise during initial assault. German forces caught unprepared despite warning of British naval presence in Norwegian waters. Failure to establish adequate lookout procedures or maintain steam pressure, allowing rapid departure, creating vulnerability that British attack exploited ruthlessly. The tactical situation reversed dramatically as remaining German destroyers recovered from initial surprise and began bringing superior numbers to bear against British flotilla now scattered throughout harbor area, engaging individual targets. German destroyers Hans Ludemann, Hermann Kühne, and Dieter von Reuter sortied from concealed positions along Fjord's irregular coastline, where they had anchored away from main harbor. 3 fresh destroyers engaging British ships already committed to attacking anchored vessels, sudden intervention by uncommitted German forces, creating dangerous tactical reversal. Additional German destroyers, Wolfgang Zenker, Bernd von Arnim, Erich Geise, and Erich Kölner, maneuvered to block British withdrawal route down Fjord. 7 German destroyers now coordinating to trap 5 British ships in confined waters where British numerical inferiority and depleted ammunition reserves created potentially catastrophic situation. HMS Hardy, attempting to disengage from harbor, encountered concentrated fire from multiple German destroyers. Shells striking British flagship, causing severe damage, including hits that disabled steering gear and reduced Hardy's speed. Crippled destroyer running aground on rocky shore near Narvik as crew abandoned vessel under continuing German fire. HMS Hunter suffered similar fate when multiple German destroyers concentrated fire on British ship attempting to support Hardy. Overwhelming gunfire causing critical damage that left Hunter adrift before vessel grounded on opposite shore. 2 British destroyers eliminated within minutes as German numerical superiority and improved tactical position reversed initial British advantage. Warburton Lee perished aboard Hardy during final moments of engagement. British flotilla commander's aggressive attack, achieving tactical surprise but ultimate strategic failure when superior German numbers and geography combined to trap British force in confined waters. Surviving British destroyers, Hotspur, Havoc, and Hostile fought their way through German blocking force positioned across Fjord. Intense close-range engagement in narrow waters, seeing destroyers exchanging gunfire and torpedoes at ranges under 1,000 meters while maneuvering to avoid grounding on Fjord's steep sides. British ships suffered additional damage during withdrawal, but successfully broke through German cordon, escape facilitated by German fuel shortages limiting pursuit, and by British destroyers' desperate determination to reach open ocean where superior British naval forces could provide support. British flotilla emerged from Fjord, having lost 2 destroyers and flotilla commander while inflicting damage on multiple German vessels, tactical defeat that nonetheless revealed German vulnerability trapped in Norwegian fjord system with inadequate fuel reserves and no means of reinforcement or resupply. The strategic assessment following First Battle of Narvik convinced British Admiralty that German destroyers trapped at Narvik represented high-value targets whose elimination would significantly degrade Kriegsmarine destroyer strength, while removing threat to Allied shipping in Norwegian waters. Decision made to commit capital ships, including battleship HMS Warspite, supported by destroyer screened for Second Battle of Narvik, planned for April 13th. Vice Admiral William Whitworth, commanding operation from HMS Warspite, faced tactical challenge of bringing 32,000-ton battleship mounting 8 381mm guns into confined waters of Fjord, where vessel size and limited maneuverability would create vulnerabilities while geography restricted ability to employ battleships' superior long-range gunnery against destroyer targets that could potentially close for torpedo attacks using Fjord's irregular coastline for concealment. HMS Warspite entered Fjord on morning of April 13th, accompanied by 9 tribal-class destroyers, including Bedouin, Punjabi, Eskimo, Cossack, Icarus, Kimberley, Forester, Foxhound, and Hero. Massive force advancing through Fjord toward Narvik, where 8 surviving German destroyers awaited British assault with critically low fuel reserves, preventing any possibility of escape or sustained maneuvering. British force benefited from air support provided by Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers operating from aircraft carrier HMS Furious positioned in Norwegian Sea, biplanes conducting reconnaissance flights over Fjord system, providing intelligence about German positions while preparing to conduct bombing attacks against German vessels once surface engagement commenced. Combined naval and air assault represented unprecedented coordination in confined Arctic waters. Tactics developed improvisation during chaotic Norwegian campaign, establishing patterns that would characterize Allied Arctic operations throughout remainder of war. German destroyers attempted defensive deployment, utilizing fjord geography to create ambush positions where British ships would face multiple threats while navigating through restricted waters, strategy complicated by fuel shortages limiting ability to maintain steam pressure necessary for rapid maneuvering, and by previous battle damage that reduced combat effectiveness of several vessels. Commander Eric Bay, commanding remaining German destroyer force, recognized hopeless tactical situation, but maintained defensive positions, understanding that German mountain troops ashore at Narvik depended on destroyer flotilla, tying down British naval forces, even though destroyers themselves faced certain elimination once British battleship brought overwhelming firepower to bear in confined engagement area. The Second Battle of Narvik commenced when leading British destroyers encountered German destroyer Erich Köllner, positioned in Fjord, northern branch of Fjord system. Exchange of gunfire and torpedoes in narrow waters, forcing German destroyer to withdraw deeper into Branch Fjord, where geography increasingly restricted maneuvering room. HMS Warspite's main armament engaged German destroyer from range of approximately 8,000 meters, 381mm shells, creating massive waterspouts around target as battleship's gunnery team adjusted fire in confined waters where shell trajectories needed precise calculation to avoid striking mountainous terrain surrounding engagement area. Direct hit from Warspite's main battery struck Erich Köllner, causing catastrophic damage that forced German crew to abandon destroyer, massive shells designed for engaging capital ships proving devastatingly effective against destroyer target, unable to withstand blast effects, even from near misses. Fairey Swordfish aircraft from HMS Furious conducted dive bombing attacks on German destroyers positioned in various fjord branches, biplanes releasing bombs from low altitude against ships trapped in confined waters with no room for evasive maneuvering, aerial assault achieving multiple hits and near misses that compounded damage British surface vessels were inflicting. German anti-aircraft fire from destroyers proved ineffective against attacking aircraft due to ammunition shortages and crew exhaustion following days of constant alert. Defensive weakness, allowing British aircraft to press attacks to dangerously low altitudes where bombing accuracy increased significantly. Combined surface and air assault overwhelmed German defensive capabilities, coordinated attack from multiple directions in three-dimensional battle space, preventing German forces from concentrating defensive fire against any single threat. HMS Eskimo engaged German destroyer Georg Thiele in close-range gun duel through narrow section of Fjord. Two destroyers exchanging fire at range under 500 meters while maneuvering to avoid collision with fjord walls. Intense engagement, seeing both vessels suffer significant damage before Georg Thiele grounded after suffering critical hits that disabled steering. British destroyer Cossack encountered Hans Ludemann attempting to escape through side fjord. Pursuit through winding waterway culminating in boarding action when British destroyer came alongside grounded German vessel, hand-to-hand combat on German destroyer's deck, representing throwback to Age of Sail tactics employed in Age of Steam and Steel. German crew aboard Hans Ludemann eventually surrendered after exhausting ammunition and recognizing futility of continued resistance. Capture, providing intelligence about German fuel situation, and revealing extent of Kriegsmarine logistical failures during Norwegian operation. Remaining German destroyers, Wolfgang Zenker, Bernd von Arnim, Erich Giese, and Dieter von Reuter, attempted final defensive stand in innermost reaches of Rombaksfjord, where narrowing waterway created choke point that British forces would need to traverse. German commanders hoping to inflict maximum casualties on attacking force, even while recognizing that own destruction was inevitable. British destroyers pressed attack through narrow fjord section, under supporting fire from HMS Warspite, positioned in wider waters where battleship could provide indirect fire support over intervening terrain. Coordinated assault, overwhelming German positions sequentially as each defending destroyer exhausted ammunition and succumbed to concentrated British fire. Wolfgang Zenker and Bernd von Arnim both grounded after suffering critical damage. Crews abandoning vessels that burned throughout afternoon, sending columns of black smoke rising between fjord walls. Erich Giese attempted to ram attacking British destroyer, but steering failure caused by battle damage prevented successful execution. German destroyer drifting onto rocky shore, where vessels settled as flooding progressed through, hull penetrated by multiple shell hits. The final German destroyer, Dieter von Reuter, defended position at terminus of Rombaksfjord until ammunition exhausted, crew scuttling vessel rather than allowing capture after hours of combat against overwhelming British force. Deliberate flooding, sending destroyer to bottom of fjord, where wreck would remain visible to British forces advancing toward Narvik. By afternoon of April 13th, all 10 German destroyers that had participated in invasion of Narvik were eliminated through combination of battle damage, grounding, scuttling, or capture. Complete destruction of destroyer flotilla, representing catastrophic loss for Kriegsmarine that could ill afford attrition of modern destroyers from already numerically inferior surface fleet facing Royal Navy's overwhelming superiority in major surface combatants. British naval victory at Narvik achieved complete tactical success, eliminating entire German destroyer force while suffering minimal additional losses beyond 2 destroyers from first battle. Strategic outcome demonstrating effectiveness of coordinated surface and air operations in confined waters while highlighting vulnerabilities created when naval forces operated far from secure bases without adequate logistic support. German mountain troops ashore at Narvik found themselves isolated without naval support or supply line. Allied naval dominance in waters surrounding Narvik, enabling subsequent British and French landing operations that would eventually recapture port in late May during Allied Norway campaign's final offensive operations before strategic situation in France forced evacuation of Allied forces from Scandinavia. The tactical lessons from Narvik battles influenced naval doctrine regarding operations in confined waters, recognition that geography could neutralize advantages of superior firepower or armor when engagement ranges shortened to point-blank distances where even light vessels could inflict critical damage on capital ships. HMS Warspite's successful employment in fjord combat demonstrated that capital ships could operate effectively in restricted waters when supported by destroyer screen and air reconnaissance, coordination proving essential for preventing ambush by smaller vessels using terrain for concealment. British destroyer tactics, emphasizing aggressive close-range engagement, proved effective against German forces, but highlighted vulnerability to counterattack when numerical inferiority allowed enemy to concentrate superior force against scattered attacking ships. lesson reinforcing importance of maintaining formation integrity during attacks in confined waters. German logistical failures at Narvik demonstrated critical importance of securing fuel supplies for naval operations far from home bases. Destroyers trapped without adequate fuel reserves, losing mobility that represented their primary tactical advantage. Vulnerability, creating a situation where superior individual ship characteristics became irrelevant when vessels could not maneuver effectively. Kriegsmarine planning for Norwegian invasion had assumed German forces would quickly secure Norwegian coastal facilities, including fuel storage. Optimistic assessment, failing to account for Norwegian resistance and Allied naval intervention that prevented establishment of secure supply lines. Fuel shortage affecting German destroyers at Narvik represented broader pattern of German logistical inadequacy during Norwegian campaign, where ambitious operational plans exceeded available resources and infrastructure to support sustained operations distant from German ports. Air support provided by Fairey Swordfish from HMS Fjord demonstrated value of carrier-based aviation for operations in areas where land-based aircraft lacked suitable airfields, biplanes' low speed and altitude capabilities proving advantageous for attacking targets in confined fjord waters where modern high-speed fighters would have difficulty operating effectively. Swordfish attacks on German destroyers validated dive-bombing tactics against naval targets in restricted waters, lessons learned at Narvik influencing subsequent carrier operations in Mediterranean and Pacific, where geography similarly constrained naval maneuvering, while aircraft provided three-dimensional assault capability that surface vessels alone could not achieve. British carrier aviation's contribution to Narvik victory encouraged expanded investment in Fleet Air Arm, despite competing resource demands from Royal Air Force. Recognition that naval aviation represented essential capability for projecting power in literal environments where geography limited conventional naval operations. The strategic impact of Narvik battles extended beyond immediate tactical results of destroyer elimination. German naval losses, contributing to Hitler's decision to postpone indefinitely planned invasion of Britain, designated Operation Sea Lion. Recognition that Kriegsmarine surface fleet lacked strength necessary to challenge Royal Navy's control of English Channel after suffering destroyer losses in Norwegian campaign that could not be quickly replaced. Narvik demonstrated vulnerability of German surface forces when operating distant from secure bases against numerically superior British naval power, lesson reinforcing German shift toward submarine warfare and commerce raiding, rather than attempting fleet actions where British numerical superiority would prove decisive. Allied success at Narvik boosted British morale during a period when war news from continent remained predominantly negative. Naval victory providing tangible demonstration of Royal Navy's continuing dominance despite German military successes ashore. Norwegian civilian population in Narvik region endured significant hardship during battles and subsequent occupation, bombardment and combat operations destroying infrastructure, while military presence disrupted normal economic activity. Neutral nation finding itself battleground for major power conflict, regardless of Norway's desire to remain uninvolved in European war. German occupation of Norway following Allied evacuation in June 1940 subjected Norwegian population to 5 years of Nazi administration, characterized by resistance, collaboration, and suffering that would profoundly shape Norwegian national identity and post-war politics. Allied failure to maintain foothold in Norway, despite Narvik victory, demonstrated that tactical naval success could not compensate for broader strategic failures when ground forces proved insufficient to defend captured territory against determined German counteroffensives supported by air superiority. Technical characteristics of vessels engaged at Narvik highlighted contrasts between destroyer designs reflecting different national priorities and technological approaches. German Z-class destroyers, representing ambitious attempt to create large fleet destroyers combining heavy armament with high speed and endurance. Ships displacing over 2,000 tons compared to British H-class destroyers 1,400 tons. Size advantage providing German vessels with superior seakeeping and heavier main battery, but creating higher fuel consumption that proved critical vulnerability during Narvik operations. British destroyers emphasized maneuverability and rate of fire over individual gun caliber, 4.7-inch weapons firing faster than German 12.7-centimeter guns, while British emphasis on crew training and fire control systems compensated for lighter individual broadside weight. Tribal-class destroyers employed during Second Battle represented British attempt to match German destroyer firepower, vessels mounting 8 4.7-inch guns, providing firepower approaching light cruiser standards while maintaining destroyer speed and maneuverability characteristics. HMS Warspite's employment at Narvik represented unusual use of battleship in confined waters, where vessels' size and draft created navigation challenges, while restricted maneuvering room, limited ability to avoid torpedo attacks. Decision to commit capital ship reflecting British confidence in destroyer screen's ability to protect battleship from close-range threats, while Warspite's main battery provided overwhelming firepower advantage that could eliminate German destroyers from ranges where return fire posed minimal threat. Warspite's 15-inch guns firing at German destroyers represented gross overkill from pure ballistics perspective. Shells designed for penetrating battleship armor, creating devastating effects when striking thin destroyer hulls, blast effects alone from near misses capable of causing significant structural damage even without direct hits. Battleship's presence in Fjord served psychological purpose beyond pure military calculation, massive warship advancing through narrow waters, demonstrating Royal Navy's determination to eliminate German forces regardless of tactical challenges. Show of force contributing to German morale collapse as defenders recognized hopelessness of situation. Captain Bernard Warburton Lee's decision to attack despite intelligence indicating stronger German force than initially reported reflected aggressive naval tradition, emphasizing offensive action over cautious preservation of force. Philosophy deeply embedded in Royal Navy culture, following Nelson's example at Trafalgar, and reinforced through decades of maintaining global maritime supremacy, where British commanders were expected to engage enemy whenever opportunity presented, regardless of tactical complications. Warburton Lee's posthumous award of Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military decoration, recognized extraordinary valor demonstrated during First Battle of Narvik, even though tactical outcome proved unsuccessful. Acknowledgement that commanders' aggressive spirit and willingness to accept risk represented essential qualities for naval leadership, even when specific engagement resulted in defeat. British naval tradition accepted casualties as inevitable cost of maintaining offensive posture. Calculation that aggressive actions throughout fleet would generate overall strategic advantage even when individual operations suffered setbacks. Commodore Friedrich Bonte's termination during opening minutes of First Battle eliminated experienced destroyer commander whose absence proved critical during subsequent German defensive efforts. Leadership vacuum created by sudden command decapitation, preventing coordinated German response during crucial period when British flotilla remained vulnerable in harbor area. German command structures' dependence on senior officers rather than promoting initiative among junior commanders created vulnerability when casualties struck leadership positions. Contrast with British emphasis on delegating tactical authority, allowing subordinate commanders to act independently when senior officers became casualties. German destroyers' subsequent defensive efforts suffered from lack of unified command, as individual ship captains made independent decisions rather than coordinating actions through centralized command authority. Fragmentation contributing to German tactical defeat during First Battle despite numerical superiority and favorable geographic position. The geographic characteristics of Norwegian fjord system created unique tactical environment unprecedented in modern naval warfare. Waterways formed by glacial activity producing steep-sided channels where water depth often exceeded several hundred meters within few meters of shore, allowing large warships to operate in extremely confined spaces while simultaneously creating ambush opportunities where vessels could conceal themselves against irregular coastline until enemy forces came within point-blank range. Fjord systems' complexity, with multiple interconnected waterways branching in various directions, created navigation challenges requiring detailed local knowledge while preventing attackers from maintaining continuous observation of all potential escape routes or hiding positions. Norwegian coastline's extreme irregularity with thousands of islands, peninsulas, and sheltered anchorages provided unlimited tactical options for forces familiar with local geography, while creating dangerous confusion for attackers operating in unfamiliar waters where charts might prove inadequate for detailed tactical planning. Arctic weather conditions during April added environmental challenges to tactical complexities of fjord combat. Unpredictable snow squalls reducing visibility to near zero at critical moments, while temperature extremes affected equipment reliability and crew endurance. Sailors required to operate weapons and equipment on exposed decks, where freezing conditions created constant physical stress. Darkness during Arctic spring remained extended compared to temperate latitudes, short daylight periods constraining operational tempo, while forcing both sides to conduct significant portions of engagement during twilight conditions where target identification became problematic. British attacks carefully timed to coincide with dawn twilight, providing just enough visibility for accurate gunnery while maintaining partial concealment from German defensive fire. Arctic environment's harshness meant that survivors from ships lost during battle faced immediate life-threatening exposure if not quickly rescued. Cold water temperatures ensuring rapid incapacitation of personnel forced to abandon damaged vessels. Factor adding urgency to rescue operations while complicating tactical decisions about when damaged ships should be abandoned versus attempting continued combat. German mountain troops landed at Narvik found themselves strategically isolated following destroyer flotilla's elimination. Soldiers trained and equipped for alpine warfare suddenly transformed into makeshift naval infantry, attempting to defend port facilities against Allied amphibious assault supported by overwhelming naval gunfire, tactical situation for which German forces lacked adequate training or doctrine. Lack of heavy weapons or artillery beyond what destroyers had been able to transport limited German defensive capabilities against Allied landing forces supported by naval bombardment, superiority in troop quality, and tactical skill insufficient to compensate for material disadvantages created by naval defeat. German troops' eventual success in holding Narvik region until June 1940, despite naval losses, demonstrated effectiveness of German tactical training and leadership. Small, isolated force conducting skillful defensive campaign that delayed significantly superior Allied forces through exploitation of mountainous terrain and harsh weather conditions that favored defenders familiar with Arctic operations. Allied amphibious operations following naval victory at Narvik demonstrated limitations of sea power alone in determining strategic outcomes. British and French forces successfully landing near Narvik in late May and eventually recapturing port after weeks of combat against German mountain troops. Tactical success rendered strategically meaningless by German offensive in France that forced Allied evacuation of Norway to concentrate forces defending French homeland. Allied decision to abandon Narvik despite successful recapture illustrated harsh realities of strategic prioritization during total war. Peripheral theaters sacrificed when developments in primary operational areas demanded concentration of available forces. Norwegian civilians left to German occupation despite Allied promises of support, reflecting broader pattern where small nations' fates were determined by great power calculations beyond their control. Comparison of Narvik battles with other destroyer engagements during World War II highlighted unique characteristics created by fjord geography, confined waters preventing maneuvers that characterize typical destroyer actions in open ocean, while forcing engagement ranges to decrease until combat resembled early 20th century torpedo boat battles, rather than modern destroyer warfare, emphasizing long-range gunnery and high-speed maneuvering. Battle of Java Sea in February 1942 and subsequent actions in Dutch East Indies similarly featured destroyer combat in restricted waters among islands. Tactical environment sharing some characteristics with Norwegian fjords, while tropical weather and different geographic features created distinct challenges. River Plate engagement in December 1939, where British cruisers engaged German pocket battleship Graf Spee, demonstrated principles of coordinated attack by multiple light vessels against superior single opponent. Tactics applicable to Narvik scenario, where British destroyers concentrated against individual German ships to overcome firepower disadvantages. Long-term influence of Narvik on Arctic naval warfare extended throughout World War II and into Cold War era, battles establishing tactical principles for operations in northern waters where geography, weather, and extended darkness created unique challenges requiring specialized training and equipment. Allied convoy operations to Soviet Union through Arctic waters beginning in summer 1941 applied lessons learned at Narvik regarding coordination between surface escorts, air cover, and exploitation of geographic features for tactical advantage. PQ-17 convoy disaster in July 1942, demonstrating catastrophic consequences when coordination failed and scattered merchant ships faced German attacks without effective naval protection. German surface raiders operating in Arctic, including battleship Tirpitz, adopted cautious tactics influenced by Kriegsmarine's Narvik losses. Recognition that destroyers and capital ships operating far from secure bases faced destruction if engaged by superior British forces. Strategic caution limiting German surface fleet's effectiveness despite possession of powerful individual vessels. Post-war Norwegian defense planning emphasized lessons from Narvik regarding vulnerability of ports and coastal areas to amphibious assault, fortifications, and mobile defense forces positioned to defend critical facilities, while recognition that small nation could not prevent great power intervention focused planning on making occupation costly rather than attempting absolute denial. NATO strategy during Cold War incorporated Norwegian territory into alliance's northern flank defense, Arctic region's strategic importance magnified by development of submarine-launched ballistic missiles and need to defend sea lanes connecting North America with Europe. Geographic position making Norway critical element of Western alliance's defensive architecture. Modern Norwegian Navy's emphasis on coastal defense vessels, submarines, and land-based anti-ship missiles reflected lessons from World War II regarding advantages defenders enjoyed when exploiting complex coastal geography against superior attacking forces, asymmetric capabilities designed to create unacceptable costs for potential aggressors rather than attempting symmetrical contest of conventional forces. Memorial sites at Narvik, including Naval Museum and preserved battlefield areas, preserve memory of battles while educating visitors about historical significance of engagements that shaped Norwegian participation in World War II. Physical preservation of combat sites, including grounded destroyer wrecks, still visible in some fjord locations, providing tangible connection to events over 80 years past. Annual commemorations attend to sailors from both sides who perished during battles. Recognition that personnel on all sides displayed courage and professionalism in extraordinarily difficult combat conditions, regardless of political causes they served, shared experience of Arctic naval warfare, creating common bond transcending wartime enmities. British and German naval veterans reunions at Narvik during post-war decades provided opportunities for former enemies to acknowledge mutual respect developed through shared understanding of fjord combat's unique challenges, reconciliation, reflecting broader European movement toward integration and cooperation that emerged from World War II's devastation. Technical analysis of vessel losses at Narvik influenced post-war destroyer designs, incorporating lessons regarding ammunition storage vulnerability, fuel system redundancy, and damage control capabilities. British and American destroyer designs in particular, emphasizing survivability features that would allow ships to sustain battle damage while remaining combat effective. German Z-class destroyers' ambitious design philosophy, attempting to maximize firepower and endurance, proved counterproductive when fuel shortages negated theoretical advantages, lesson reinforcing design principles, emphasizing operational reliability and logistical sustainability over maximum paper specifications. Modern destroyer designs incorporate Narvik's lessons regarding operations in confined waters, weapon systems and sensors optimized for engaging targets at various ranges rather than focusing exclusively on long-range anti-aircraft or anti-submarine capabilities, that might prove irrelevant in literal environments where geography constrains engagement ranges. Battle of Narvik, when British destroyers penetrated 70 kilometers through Norwegian fjords to engage German invasion force, where HMS Warspite brought battleship main battery into waters barely wider than ship's length, and where 10 German destroyers were systematically eliminated in 5 days of intense combat, represents watershed moment in naval warfare, demonstrating that traditional concepts of sea control required radical adaptation when geography created tactical environments unprecedented in naval history. Narrow Norwegian fjords transformed from peaceful fishing waters into destroyer killing grounds, where modern warships maneuvered in spaces meant for coastal vessels, while mountains channeled engagement ranges down to point-blank distances, where even heavily armored capital ships faced vulnerabilities from light weapons, creating tactical problems that would influence Arctic naval operations throughout World War II and beyond into modern era of literal warfare, where coastal geography continues to constrain and complicate naval operations, requiring adaptation of tactics designed for open ocean combat to environments where land and sea merge in complex patterns, defying traditional distinctions between maritime and terrestrial warfare. Torpedo warfare at Narvik demonstrated both capabilities and limitations of destroyer primary armament in confined waters. British destroyers firing multiple torpedoes during both battles, achieving few hits despite short ranges due to restricted maneuvering room, preventing effective torpedo runs, while German counterfire and geographic obstacles complicated attack approaches, experience reinforcing recognition that torpedoes optimized for open ocean engagements proved less effective in restricted waters where targets could take evasive action within torpedoes' minimum arming distance, or where shallow water and irregular bottom topography created unpredictable torpedo behavior. German torpedoes employing magnetic detonators experienced reliability problems at Narvik, similar to issues affecting Kriegsmarine torpedo performance throughout early war period. Technical failures undermining theoretical advantages of advanced magnetic fusing systems designed to maximize explosive effects by detonating beneath target's keel, rather than requiring direct contact, embarrassing performance of supposedly superior German torpedo technology, contributing to broader pattern of technical overreach, where complex systems proved less reliable than simpler designs under operational conditions. Gunnery techniques employed during Narvik battles adapted destroyer fire control systems designed for long-range engagement to extreme close-range combat, where fire control calculations became trivial, while rapid target acquisition and high rate of fire determined engagement outcomes. British emphasis on crew training and fire discipline proving advantageous when engagements occurred at ranges where shells' flight time measured in seconds rather than tens of seconds, characteristic of typical destroyer actions. Gun crews' proficiency in manual loading and rapid target shifts, compensating for fire control systems operating outside design parameters in point-blank exchanges, where electronic range-finding and ballistic calculations added negligible value compared to human perception and reaction speed. Norwegian War Museum at Narvik preserves artifacts from battles, including recovered weapons, personal items from sailors on both sides, and extensive photographic documentation of engagement and subsequent occupation period, exhibits presenting battles within broader context of Norwegian experience during World War II, while acknowledging complex legacy where naval victory failed to prevent 5 years of German occupation that profoundly shaped Norwegian national identity. Underwater archaeological surveys of destroyer wrecks in Fjord and associated waterways conducted during post-war decades documented extent of battle damage while providing insights into combat conditions through examination of hull damage patterns, shell penetrations, and torpedo strike effects preserved in cold Arctic waters. Scientific investigation complementing historical records while creating detailed understanding of technical aspects of destroyer combat in confined waters that oral histories and official reports could not fully capture. The educational value of Narvik battles for modern naval officers studying history of maritime warfare extends beyond pure tactical lessons to encompass broader strategic questions about employment of naval power in support of ground operations, relationship between sea control and land warfare outcomes, and limitations of naval superiority when broader strategic situation prevents effective exploitation of tactical victories. Naval academies worldwide include Narvik in curriculum as case study, demonstrating principles of operations in restricted waters, coordination between surface and air assets, and importance of logistics planning when conducting operations distant from secure bases. The enduring relevance of Narvik's lessons for contemporary naval operations in littoral environments where coastal geography constrains traditional naval tactics ensures that April 1940 battles continue receiving scholarly attention, despite passing of generations since British destroyers first entered Fjord, beginning series of engagements that would eliminate entire German destroyer flotilla, while establishing tactical principles for Arctic naval warfare that remained valid throughout World War II and influenced naval thinking into modern era of precision-guided weapons and network-centric operations, where fundamental realities of geography and physics continue constraining tactical options regardless of technological advances in sensors and weapon systems.